The film begins with 13-year-old Sam Cleary, who recounts the legend of two superpowered twin brothers. Gifted with immense strength, they were ostracized and labeled as freaks after accidentally hurting others. Their tragic story takes a darker turn when fearful townspeople burn down their house, killing their parents. As they grow older, one brother rises as the city's protector, Samaritan, while the other, fueled by vengeance, becomes the feared villain, Nemesis. In a climactic confrontation, Nemesis crafts a mighty hammer and lures Samaritan to a power plant, where the two engage in a brutal battle that ends with both presumed dead. Despite the world believing they perished, Sam is convinced that Samaritan survived. Now living in the struggling streets of Granite City with his mother, Tiffany, Sam does what he can to support them. Alongside his friend, Jace, he salvages copper wire from abandoned buildings, earning meager pay. Their hustle leads them into trouble when they cross paths with a local gang tied to infamous crime lord Cyrus. Reza, one of Cyrus's gang members, recruits the boys for a petty job, staging a distraction during a convenience store robbery. Sam steps up, pretending to be hit by a car, while the others snatch what they think are valuable items. But when they return to Cyrus, the loot turns out to be worthless bags of chips. Tensions rise as Reza attempts to pin the failure on Sam, but Sam speaks up with the truth. Before things escalate, Cyrus arrives with his intimidating enforcer, Syl. Surprisingly, Cyrus praises Sam's honesty and quick thinking, putting him in higher regard than Reza. Sam also notices something troubling. Cyrus idolizes Nemesis, claiming he fought for the people in his own twisted way. Sam returns home with a small cut of the money he earned and hands it to his mother, Tiffany, hoping it will be enough to appease their landlord and allow them to stay in their apartment a little longer. However, Tiffany instantly suspects the money came from illegal activity and warns Sam not to follow that path, fearing where it might lead. Elsewhere, Cyrus and his gang acquire a new stash of advanced weapons, clearly preparing for something bigger. The following day, Reza, still bitter over being embarrassed in front of Cyrus, tracks down Sam with two of his crew. They corner him in an alley and begin to beat him up. Just as things get violent, Joe Smith, Sam's quiet and reclusive neighbor, a seemingly ordinary sanitation worker, steps in. Joe unleashes surprising force, hurling the attackers away with ease. When Reza threatens him with a knife, Joe calmly catches the blade with his bare hand and crushes it without drawing a drop of blood. Sam, stunned by the display of superhuman strength, becomes convinced that Joe is none other than the long-lost hero, Samaritan. Meanwhile, Cyrus, Syl, and their crew raid a heavily secured warehouse using their new weapons. There, Cyrus uncovers the iconic mask and warhammer of Nemesis, the legendary weapon used in the final battle against Samaritan. At that very moment, Joe seems to sense something, the reawakening of a power he knows all too well. Determined to prove his theory, Sam pays a visit to Albert Kassler, an author and expert who once wrote a book chronicling the story of Samaritan and Nemesis. Sam insists that his neighbor Joe is the real Samaritan, but Albert is skeptical and visibly irritated. This isn't the first time Sam has chased a false lead. After enough persistence, Albert relents and takes Sam into his private study, revealing a room filled with theories and memorabilia. He explains how Nemesis's hammer was recovered from the wreckage at the power plant, and shares his belief that Nemesis's true goal was to plunge the city into chaos by killing his twin brother Samaritan, a plan that ultimately led to both their apparent deaths. Still not satisfied, Sam sneaks into Joe's apartment looking for solid proof. He's quickly caught, and Tiffany reprimands him for the invasion of privacy. Surprisingly, Joe isn't angry. Instead, he shows patience and restraint. Later outside, Sam pushes him once again to reveal his true identity, but Joe remains silent and guarded. Just then, Reza and his gang barrel toward them in a car, aiming to strike Joe as revenge. The car hits him hard, sending Joe flying. Sam rushes to his side, believing he's seriously injured, but to his shock, Joe begins to rapidly heal, snapping his bones back into place. Still denying he's Samaritan, Joe takes Sam back to his apartment, where he tries to downplay everything while stuffing himself with ice cream, revealing it helps regulate his body temperature after using his powers. Meanwhile, Cyrus begins unleashing chaos across Granite City, wielding the hammer of Nemesis and proclaiming himself as the villain's successor. His message of rebellion resonates with the city's most desperate citizens, who begin to follow him as a symbol of uprising. Watching the destruction unfold on the news, Joe grows visibly unsettled by the resurrection of Nemesis's ideology. But instead of leaping into action, he spends more time with Sam, teaching him that true strength isn't always about fighting, but knowing when to hold back. Sam rejoins Cyrus and his gang during a casual lunch, but things quickly take a dark turn. He watches in horror as they bring in a corrupt police officer who had interfered with their operations. While Cyrus initially pretends to let the man go, he coldly shoots him in the back as he attempts to flee, and Sam sees everything. Traumatized, Sam flees the scene, only to stumble upon Reza and his crew assaulting his friend Jace. Sam jumps in to defend him, but is badly beaten and ends up hospitalized. At the hospital, Tiffany is furious when Joe arrives. She blames him for not stepping in to protect Sam when he needed it most. Later, Cyrus's men follow Joe, hoping to take him down. But instead, Joe unleashes his full power, effortlessly overpowering the entire group. Amid the chaos, a young girl witnesses his incredible strength. When one of the goons hurls a grenade, Joe grabs the girl and flips a car to shield them both from the blast. A dramatic moment that confirms the rumors. Samaritan is truly back. The event spreads quickly, and Cyrus is enraged, knowing that the return of the hero could jeopardize his entire plan. Determined to stop the violence, Sam confronts Joe, warning him about Cyrus's escalating threat. But Joe, still reluctant to return to the life he left behind, refuses to get involved. Not long after, Cyrus and his men storm Joe's apartment, guns blazing. But he's already gone. Turning their attention to Sam, the gang invades his building. Sam and Tiffany attempt to flee to the rooftop, but Syl blocks their path at the fire escape as Cyrus's men close in. In a desperate act, Sam lands a solid punch on Reza. But Cyrus has other plans. He orders his men to take Sam, knowing it's the only way to draw Samaritan out of hiding. Moments later, Joe returned to find Tiffany injured. Through her pain, she told him they had taken Sam. Cyrus takes Sam to an abandoned factory, intending to complete the mission that Nemesis started years ago, to burn the system down. But before he can act, Joe arrives, driving a truck straight through the factory wall, detonating a planted bomb that wipes out several of Cyrus's men, including Syl. Enraged, Cyrus grabs Nemesis's hammer and engages Joe in a brutal showdown. As the two clash, a shocking truth is revealed. Joe isn't Samaritan, he's Nemesis. A flashback reveals that Nemesis never wanted to kill his brother. On the contrary, he tried to save him during their final confrontation at the power plant, but Samaritan fell into the fire and died. Racked with guilt, Nemesis disappeared, abandoning his villainous path in honor of his brother's legacy. Back in the present, Joe unleashes his full strength, battling through the last of Cyrus's gang before facing Cyrus himself. In a final blow, Joe uses the hammer against its new wielder, bending its steel handle around Cyrus's body and hurling him to his death. But the fight leaves Joe overheated and on the verge of collapse. Sam douses him with water, helping him cool down before the two flee the burning building. Outside, Sam is still stunned to learn the truth, that Joe was Nemesis all along. But to him, Joe is still a hero. As emergency crews arrive and the police arrest Reza and his gang, Sam steps forward, telling the crowd that Samaritan is alive, and he saved his life. The crowd erupts and cheers. Joe gives Sam a final look, a quiet, knowing smile, before disappearing into the city's shadows, his true identity still a secret.